Hi, everybody. I think we're gonna give it a few minutes till everyone joins, but we'll start pretty soon. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's fun to watch the numbers click up.
Feel free to say hi in the chat if we know you guys, even if we don't know you. And we'll just give it a second.
Nice. Got Tanya, Serhi saying hi. Hey, guys. So some people are raising hands. I don't know if we have, I think because, oh, you can invite. Okay. Here's Anya.
Thanks for bearing with us too. Apparently 900 people signed up, which is crazy. I don't know if we're gonna actually get that many people, but we're only up to like 150 so far. So maybe we'll give it another minute for people to join.
Hey, Shlomi. See you out there.
Oh, no way. Nice. Slime.
Yeah, I saw someone ask, is it in English? It is in English. Our Ukrainian is terrible, so I think,
yeah,
I think you guys will want it that way. Hello, hello. Oh, I wish. No, we need to learn some. We need to learn some Ukrainian.
Yeah, when should we do this, Aaron? When should we start?
I think we could get started pretty soon. I think, you know, people are trickling in and yeah, I mean, I think we can do our introductions. You know, first, for those of you coming in late, just thank you. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be a lot of fun for us. We're excited to do this. I'm sorry we can't see you, but it's good you can see us. It's good you can hear us. You know, just to give you guys a little bit of background of who we are. We just wanted to first say hello. It's great to meet you all, and thank you to Anya, thank you to Skvat for making this happen. And you might be wondering, who the heck are we? You know, who are these guys that you're about to hear from on how to present? And you should be asking, why should you trust us? You know, we haven't written a book on presentations. You know, we're not salespeople. You know, we don't have degrees in psychology. We're just two creative guys who found their way into advertising. And through the nature of the business, we've had to pitch a lot of clients in order to make work. So in order for us to take these crazy ideas that we have, we've had to convince other people to enable those ideas and give us the money to make those ideas. So it's a really important part of this business. It doesn't only apply, what we're about to talk about doesn't only apply to the context of a creative person talking to somebody who isn't creative or talking to a client. What we're about to talk about could be applied for if you're a brand manager and you're trying to convince your boss, if you're an account person and you're trying to convince another agency that this is a good idea, if you're about to kick people off on production and you're going to talk to a director, You might need to convince them that this is, what you're about to make is a good idea. These are just important skills, and you're always selling your ideas. So they're just good habits to get into. And then just to give you guys a little bit more background of who we are, where we come from, Dave and I have been partners for over 10 years. So we've had an amazing partnership. I come from the visual background. I've got a background in drawing, painting, design, filmmaking, and advertising. And Dave, you want to tell them where you come from?
Yeah, I've been a writer my whole career. I was actually an art major in high school, but decided that writing was kind of a more pragmatic career trajectory. So I started out as a PR writer, and then I was a reporter for a little while. And then I met Aaron at my first ad job, and we've been awesome partners ever since. And we are, if we go to the next slide, like we said, just a small pitch here. We're the founders of Public Display of Affection, which is a creative studio that makes brands famous through the sexy, strategic power of love. And we're not going to spend too much time talking about how cool our new agency is, but it does represent a conviction that we've had our entire careers, which is that for a brand to thrive, it really needs to show love for its audience. So instead of making advertising that talks at people, we have always made non-traditional work that taps into the passions of our target audience, and not only taps into those passions, but also gives people something that they can interact with, they can love, they can kind of get into, they can share, they can like. So we make work that's designed to be loved at a mass scale. And Aaron's going to take you through in a minute, like some of the work that we've done. But what you'll see is that some of it is kind of crazy. So these are the kinds of ideas that are really hard to sell because they don't look like normal advertising ideas. So we do think that we've got, some credibility in terms of explaining how to sell ideas like this.
Yeah, and I think one of the themes you're going to hear from us is empathy. It's empathy for the audience that you're making the work for. It's empathy for the audience that you're pitching to. And that means getting outside of yourself and really thinking about where are they coming from? What are the things that they care about? And that's going to be one of the foundations from which, we kind of make a lot of our decisions. So just to give you a sense, these are some of the ideas that we've made. On the far left, it's called Wake Up and Smell the Bacon. This was made by, we made this for Oscar Mayer. They're a bacon brand. They've been around in the States for over 100 years. And at the time when Dave and I took over as creative directors on the brand, their marketing was pretty bad. It was pretty stodgy. They hadn't really done a lot. They weren't really seen as a modern brand. They were seen as a pretty old brand. So the brief was, sorry if you hear a dog in the background. The brief was, how do you modernize this brand? How do you bring them into the 21st century? So what we created was this dongle that fits into your phone, and it connects with an app that's an alarm clock app. And then when the alarm clock goes off and it wakes you up, you hear the sound, the sizzling sound of bacon. It would emit the scent of bacon, and it would kind of fill the room with the wonderful smell of bacon. So we pitched this. It was a brand new idea. Nobody had made anything like this. And it worked. We were able to get this on the nightly news. People were talking about it online. And it definitely positioned Oscar Mayer as a brand that understands the 21st century. I think coupled with that, we've got what's called Sizzle. This was a dating app, a real dating app designed for bacon lovers. So bacon lovers could join the app. And, I'm sure it's the same over there, but in the States, Americans love bacon. So they really like this app. It was a way for them to meet each other and to go on dates. And I think a couple people found some love. And it was really just honestly that simple, and it worked, and it was a big hit. The one below that is called the Wiener Rovers. So, and these are all a cluster of Oscar Mayer ideas. Oscar Mayer is a brand. They also make hot dogs, and they have a giant vehicle called the Wienermobile, and it's about 36 feet long, and it's shaped like a hot dog, and it drives around cities, and people love it. So what we did to announce the summer grilling season was we created a miniature version of that. So what you're seeing here splashing around in the mud is an all-terrain vehicle sized, about 48 inches, that was remote controlled and could go anywhere. It could go on beaches, where people like to grill. It could go into parks. And what you can't see is that yellow band that's on its back would open up and it could serve people hot dogs. So we made videos out of this. We sent it into parks and stuff like that. And it was a big hit and a lot of fun. And then really quickly, the last two, the one that's on the bottom is a stadium that we created in Fortnite. So Super Bowl is a big time for advertisers over here in the States. And Verizon, which is a wireless carrier, wanted to talk about 5G. So instead of talking at them and making a TV ad, what we did is we recreated the stadium where the Super Bowl was taking place in the game Fortnite. And the reason we did that is because the real stadium, because of COVID, because of the pandemic, people weren't actually able to attend the event in person. So we created this space where people could come together, they could win prizes, they could meet NFL players, avatar to avatar. And it became this place that was about connection. And we brought millions of people together. And it was sort of this natural role for the brand to play as a wireless provider where they were the ones offering that connective tissue. And then lastly, we've got a TikTok activation that we did with this K-pop band called Blackpink. This was done for Samsung with Wyden and Kennedy, who wrote the song. We wrote a very on-the-nose song about the product. So an awesome screen, awesome camera, long-lasting battery life. And that was a song that Blackpink recorded. And then our part is we brought this to TikTok. We had Blackpink create a dance. And then we had a bunch of influencers do duets, and people were able to sing along and create these dances. So they're able to sort of learn about the product and participate in this. And that's just a smattering of the kinds of ideas that, we've sold.
Yep. And these are some of the brands that we've worked with through our careers. We did a lot of work for NASCAR, bottom right-hand corner. They're like the Formula One of America. We, as you know, and Aaron just spoke about, we did a lot of work for Oscar Mayer. They're like a big meat company, and IBM. And, we can give you juicy gossip on each of these clients, but we won't do that. But what's funny about them is that every one of these clients was a bit different. Some of these clients wanted to play it really safe. Other clients wanted to be famous. Other clients were hard to work with because they had a ton of hierarchy, right? So we would present, and then we'd have to, present again to their bosses, and then we'd have to present again to their bosses. And so each time we were dealing with a different kind of audience that had different motivations. And so the things that we're going to talk about are applicable to a range of clients. And I think, some of the things that we're going to discuss, they're kind of basic so that you can kind of apply them to whoever your audience will be. And I think they make sense no matter who you're dealing with. I think what we're saying is valuable, and you'll be able to kind of get your point across in terms of selling work. And yeah, I think the main point is, before we made any of the ideas in our careers, and a lot of them were kind of crazy ideas that were not easy to sell through, we had to convince our clients that they were worth making. So that's what we're here to do, right? We're here to talk about how to convince people to greenlight your idea.
Yeah. And the reason I chose this photo, this cheesy stock photo, was because the point is, you can't sell to people if they don't trust you. So I don't trust this guy. I don't think anyone would trust this guy. And it's really important to establish that trust. And there's ways you can do that, in a genuine way, in a quick way, because oftentimes you don't have a lot of time. You might be in a position where you only get 15 minutes, or you only get an hour with someone. And during that hour, they've got to get a sense of who you are, what you stand for, and why they should trust you, and why they should give you their money. So that's a really important point. And this is the title of our presentation. You know, it goes a lot of ways. I talked about it a little bit before, but it's, you know, selling ideas isn't always just you as a pitchman. It could be you trying to make sure that your boss, you know, doesn't kill an idea. You know, whether they're a CMO, whether they're a creative director, whether they're a brand manager, or account executive, what have you. And because advertising is a team sport, you need to be able to tell people very clearly why an idea is good. And what that does in a very succinct way, in a very simple way. And what that enables these people to do is take that and share that with everybody else. So it's incredibly important to keep things simple, to have a real solid rationale. We're going to go through, you know, kind of what our steps are to develop that. And honestly, a lot of this is not rocket science, but these are the tools that we've learned over the years that really do help sell an idea. Number one, make sure you have a good idea. Now, this is a duh slide, right? Like, obviously you should have a good idea. But, you know, good ideas mean different things to different people. So, you know, oftentimes what Dave and I will do is we take an idea that we like. You know, oftentimes we'll hear an idea from a new, you know, a creative team, and they'll pitch us and we'll like it immediately, you know, if it's a good one. And then we have to start thinking about, why is it a good idea? How is this going to work for the brand? You know, how will this serve the client's purposes? Because you know, if you're a creative person, you might like the idea for different reasons. You might like the idea because you think it's funny. You might like the idea because you get to make something that you've never made before. The client doesn't care about any of that. The client has marketing objectives. They've got products they've got to sell. They've got deadlines that they have to meet. They have a whole host of pressure that's on them that you need to be thinking about and you need to have answers for in order for that idea to sell. So.
Yep. So we do kind of have a bit of a checklist for what makes a good idea. And this is something that we've never really had written down through our careers, but through our experience and through selling ideas and making ideas, we've kind of come to a certain philosophy and a certain set of ingredients that do make for a good idea and let you know whether your idea is worth making. So the first one is, do you feel it in your gut? And this is a funny one, right? Because we talk about, like, you know, advertising being both an art and a science. And I know that, you know, one of the guys who has given a talk here at SQuat before is Anselmo Ramos. And he gave a talk, I think, on whether you feel it in your gut. And he's the founder of an agency called Gut. So that completely makes sense. But he's also right about that, because you should not ignore that feeling. For the creatives out there, I think most of us as creatives, as artists, I think musicians are this way too, writers, we're pretty good cultural observers and cultural filters. So when you feel something strongly in your gut, it is a good sign that you're on the right track. I think the most important thing, though, is that that's not enough, right? Just because you feel good about something doesn't mean that A, it's the right idea, or B, that you'll be able to convince someone else that it's an idea worth making. You really have to know why it's good. And we're going to get to that in a minute, because a lot of our presentation is making sure you know why and you can express why that idea is going to work.
Yeah. And me personally, I have a fairly simple gut check for myself is, am I excited to present it? Can I just not wait for, you know, the Thursday that it's due and I can't wait to share it? Or even better, am I worried someone's going to steal it? If you think you have an original idea and you think it's so good that someone's going to take it and make it, that's a great feeling. Then you know you're really onto something and you've got an amazing idea. Now, another filter: will it resonate with culture? You know, will people connect with the idea? So, this is pretty simple. The way that we do it offers a pretty good filter is, can a journalist write a headline about the idea? So for example, the Oscar Mayer dating app was Oscar Mayer creates a dating app for bacon lovers. And that was pretty close to what journalists wrote. That was pretty close to the headlines that we saw. Now, if we had decided to make, let's say, some content on Instagram or Facebook, or we created a print ad, no publication, no writer would have wrote, Oscar Mayer made some ads, for bacon. That's not something people write. So we tend to look at ideas through the lens of, is it simple enough to write as a headline in a news article? And it's a good exercise to go through, just pressure check it. Verizon recreates, the Super Bowl stadium in Fortnite. That's a press headline. The other thing we try to do is we really try to think about the audience. We start there first. What is it? And these are the people that we're trying to reach. Are they gamers? Are they parents? Who are these people? And what are they going through? How do they talk to each other? What platforms are they on? So we tend to do deep dives on, if we're talking about gamers, for example, we would use Twitter, Discord, Reddit, Twitch, and we would look at all those platforms and we would see what ideas have been done. And we would try to find, are there any unmet needs? Are there anything we could do to entertain them, to delight them, to add value to the community? And that's a really important way to think about an idea. What role is it playing in the consumer's life? That'll add to their life instead of distract.
Yeah, one more thing to add here is, when we think about culture and consumer behaviors, they're very important for us in terms of ideation and what we pitch. We usually think about culture kind of and consumer behaviors as kind of like a river, right? Like a fast moving river with a current. And ideally, our idea is something that we're throwing into that river. And it's either going to float with that current and people will kind of like love it and take it with them and enjoy it, or it's going to sink. So we always are trying to like add our ideas into trends and cultural things and behaviors that are already happening, because we know they're going to get traction if we do that.
Yep. And then next up, this is super important. Does it say something compelling about the brand or the product? What statement is it making? You can't just design an experience that delights gamers. You have to say something about the brand that you're advertising for. This is obvious, but sometimes people forget this. And when clients, the people that you're pitching to, hear an idea, this is what they're looking for. They're looking for, what does it say about my brand? How does it advertise what I want to advertise? So, for example, on the dating app for bacon lovers, as a sign up, you had to take a quiz about Oscar Mayer bacon. And it would tell you about all the attributes that made that bacon special, how long it was smoked, how it was hand cut and all that stuff. So that's where it really made an impression on the consumer about that bacon. What we're looking at here is something we did for Oreo. Oreos are meant to be shared. This was a tiny cookie. It was called an Oreo mini. And they wanted to advertise this with the world, but they're really tiny. So what we created is a way for people to share them in the mail, and they could send these tiny little packages along with a little note for their friend. So that was really fun. It said Oreos are made to be shared, and it really was just that simple and sweet.
Yep. And this is important too, right? Like when you're asking yourself whether an idea is good, you do need to be realistic about whether you can execute it really well. Have you thought about how to make it with the budget that you have, with the team that you have, with the clients that you have, right? You might have an amazing idea that you love, but if a client isn't willing to like really do it in the way that it needs to be great, then it's not that great, because let's remember that bad ideas can get better in production. There's always kind of this tension in advertising, right, between concept and execution. And sometimes an idea that doesn't sound that mind-blowing if you execute it really well, if the design is amazing, if the writing is really good, then it can get way better in production. And also good ideas can get worse in production. So knowing, realistically what you can do is super important. Because an amazing idea that you can't make well is not a good idea, right? So it's important to be really sure about what you can do and be realistic about it. And sometimes you need to adjust your production, and you need to adjust the idea based on what's realistic for that production. Because most of the time, especially in me and Aaron's careers, you don't have the budget of a blockbuster like Dune to make the thing. So there's always going to be a bit of evolution between the concept and then how you actually make it. And one example of that is another bacon campaign that we made for Oscar Mayer. We had a lot of good bacon years back in the day. This one was called Say It with Bacon. And that the campaign was, we created an e-commerce site where families and wives and children could send a bacon gift to their dad for Father's Day. And that was fun because, a lot of dads like bacon, and, what do you get for the dad who loves it all? We kind of liked that tonally this was a bit of a joke, but it was also real, right? Like, these were real packages that you can send, and each one came with like another little gift depending on what kind of dad you had. So there was like the outdoorsy dad and kind of like the, fashiony dad. There was, kind of like the cool dad. So each one was a special gift. And with the budget that we had, we could only make and send 700 of these. So we had to adjust the execution of our idea based on that reality. And 700 for a national campaign where we're trying to get millions of hits. And what's good about this is because we did it physically, we got a lot of PR out of it. And we had digital ads that were driving traffic to the site. But still, only 700 is not that much. So what we had to do is we only made 100 available each day. And that gave us a week of traction. And each day was kind of a new drop. It was kind of like a sneaker drop. And every day it sold out, in minutes. And when I say sold out, we weren't making people pay for this. It was all free. But the traffic driving to the site got people excited. And it was kind of nice that there was scarcity. And even though we only had 700 total, we were able to stretch that campaign for about a week and get as much traction and promotion as we needed out of it. And it's just an example of needing to adjust in execution based on the realities of the budget.
Yeah. And then another really quick idea. This is something we did for IBM Watson. So that's a piece of artificial intelligence created by IBM. And they wanted to talk about how it helps humans do what they do better. So if you're a doctor, it helps you be a better doctor. In this case, if you're a musician, it can actually help you be a better musician. So instead of just saying that, people are pretty scared, I think for good reason of AI and robots, taking over the earth. And, if you start thinking of Terminator, that movie, if you've seen it, people have some bad associations with artificial intelligence. So we wanted to make something that, was interesting, was compelling, was creative. So we took this cold piece of technology, IBM Watson, and we paired it with a musician, and we showed that collaboration and how Watson helped the musician create the song. So that was really fun. It was a long process. It took about 6 months to create a piece of music. And the person that we partnered with is Alex da Kid. Now, he's a very famous within the music industry producer. He's produced Imagine Dragons, he's produced Eminem, he's produced Rihanna, and that was great. But I think one flaw of this campaign is he's not really a known figure. So it would have made more sense for us to partner with Imagine Dragons and put them at the forefront. So this one worked. This idea was a success, but I think it would have been even stronger if we had worked with a more famous musician to make the point. Okay, so Next, we're going to talk about how to prove the strategy behind your idea. This is incredibly important because, whether we like it or not as creatives, clients buy strategy more than they buy creativity. So it's super important to know why your idea works on a strategic level and be able to clearly explain it to others. The idea can't just be cool. It needs to solve a business problem. It needs to work for the brand. And this is why clients care so much about strategy. The ideas that you present have to have brains. They have to have smarts. Now, it could be smart for different reasons. It could be smart, the idea, because let's pretend every other brand is doing the same thing in a category and you're going to do the opposite. That's a creative strategy. I think it's a good one because you're going to stand out. Or an idea can be smart because it's born from an audience insight, that there's a behavior, a trend, an unmet need, a feeling that hasn't been articulated. And the idea is born out of this. And strategically, you're going to attach yourself to that because the audience will love it. So there's a few different ways to do it. We're going to kind of illuminate this a little bit more. Let's get into it.
Yeah, just to make that point again, your creativity has to have purpose, right? And you need to convince people of the strategy behind it. I mean, that's at least been our experience through our careers, because let's remember that most clients aren't creative people. They're numbers people, right? They probably went to business school. They got their MBAs. Doesn't mean that they, can't recognize and acknowledge and support creativity, but usually they're coming at it from a different point of view. And often they don't trust their own gut, and I'm not saying that as a knock, but their job, they've got a lot of pressure, right? There's more risk in the decision they're making than in, for us, we're pitching an idea. If they don't buy it, we'll come up with another one. For them, they've got a lot of money that they're going to spend on something, and they need to be sure that it's going to work before they spend that money. And often they need to convince their bosses, right? Usually when you're presenting, you're not presenting to the final decision maker that's going to say yes or no to the idea. So when they take that idea to their bosses and their bosses take it to their bosses, they can't just say, oh, you know what, let's make this idea because it's super cool and the creatives are pretty sure they're going to work. They need evidence that it's going to work before they can say yes to making it and spending a lot of money on it.
Yep. And then, oftentimes that evidence comes in the form of data, right? You can share with them facts and figures that support the things that and these things might be obvious. It might be incredibly evident to you that Gen Z uses TikTok, just to take an example, and Gen Z does dance challenges. Now, for a client who's about to spend hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, you might want to take something that we already know and put it on the page as an actual number. You might want to say, X number of Gen Z is on TikTok and Y number of those folks participate in challenges, or, this amount of hours is spent on TikTok instead of TV. And that's going to support something that you already know, to be true. But it just gives them the rationale if they're the kind of person who needs that. Now, again, at the beginning of this, like Dave said, with all these brands, people are different, and you have to get down to what is this person motivated by? Sometimes a lot of clients are motivated by emotion. They make decisions based off emotion, and we're going to talk about emotion and how to lean into that. And oftentimes when I'm presenting data, I try to wrap it in the emotion of that data. So, for example, with the Verizon Fortnite Stadium, when we talked about that activation and why it was good, it was about people aren't going to be able to, because of the pandemic, people aren't going to be able to get together in person at the stadium. They're not going to be able to have parties and meet each other like they normally would. People tend to have lots of Super Bowl parties. And that's a huge opportunity for us. And when I say us, I mean Verizon as a wireless brand to play a role to connect people. So we presented all that data about how many people were not going to be doing the things they would normally do, but we wrapped it in an emotion. So we turn that data into a story. And I do think that's really important. I think, make sure whenever you can to not just present things kind of coldly and mathematically, explain what does that mean for people? What does this say about the people that you're trying to reach?
Yep. Another example of that was a campaign that we did for Hanes called Soften the Blow. And this picture is actually taken from that campaign. This is a real, it's either a trebuchet or a catapult that we built for the idea to basically like launch things into the air. And I'll explain why in a second. But this idea, it was called Hanes Soften the Blow. Hanes, if you don't know, is a big American clothing brand. They make t-shirts, they make socks, they make underwear, they make kind of like basics, sweatpants type stuff. And the product was something called Hanes Comfort Blend t-shirts that were super, super soft. And so our brief was basically just to get men, it was a t-shirt for men, to buy this shirt and to express how soft and revolutionary this technology and this material was. It was like some kind of crazy cotton blend that was like the softest thing that you've ever felt, right? So our job was to basically convince people that these shirts were so soft that they just had to get them. And so the idea was kind of, this was early in our careers, kind of this crazy idea where we were going to prove how soft these t-shirts were by seeing if they could soften the blow of like destructive actions. So this GIF was also from the campaign. And what we were doing was destructive stuff. And then we were doing them again with the t-shirts to see if the shirt could soften the blow. So this is kind of the before. Well, it's like, well, if you throw a Vespa off a cliff, it'll get destroyed. But if you wrap that Vespa in a giant ball of t-shirts, and I wish we had that picture, but we like literally wrapped a second Vespa in so many t-shirts that it became like this giant ball. And then we rolled it down the cliff. Then it proves that the t-shirts are so soft that they can soften the blow. We also had like, we had different videos. So one of them was like an antique violin, and we wrapped that in a bunch of t-shirts, and then we dropped a piano on it to see if the t-shirts could protect the violin. And then we had the trebuchet that we showed earlier, the kind of catapult, where we just basically like launched like flower vases and antique clocks onto basically this huge target made out of t-shirts to see if they won't break. And of course, often they did, and that wasn't really the point. So in this case, the emotion was comedy, right? It was just kind of like making a joke, but our data and our evidence for this idea working was that at the time, and this was more than 10 years ago, destruction videos on YouTube were huge. There were tons of YouTube videos that were just kind of stuff breaking and being destroyed. And they had millions of views, and they were, big with men, with the target audience of this product. And their comments were amazing. Like people just loved these videos. And so the only way we were ever able to sell this idea was by telling the clients that this was a trend that was already happening. And we were just going to add to that trend in a completely unexpected way. Like this, the campaign for a shirt, we didn't even have anyone wearing the shirt ever. We were never kind of showing like how the shirt works out in the world. We were just focusing on the softness in a way that was totally surprising. And our evidence for that working was that this was a trend that was happening already.
Yep. And I think just to talk about the personal delivery of this idea, I remember, and it was probably about 10 years ago at this point when we presented this. I remember saying to the client, this is crazy. This is a crazy idea. And I think sometimes saying something out loud that they might be thinking is a good way for you to develop trust. And it puts them at ease. It lets them know that you're thinking about them as an audience. So don't be afraid. You know, if there's something you think someone is thinking, it's good to voice it. Another example of that, I can kind of roll into this, is Dave and I, you know, we just started PDA, and we've been pitching clients, and some of these clients are pretty new. You know, they haven't been around as long as Verizon. They haven't been around as long as Oscar Mayer. People don't know who they are. And they're asking us, what's your experience? You know, what are the ideas that you've made in the past? And I remember I was pitching these guys and describing this idea that we're looking at. You know, this is made in Fortnite. It had, you know, it's done for the Super Bowl, which is, you know, pretty expensive in terms of being able to create it. And it's a good idea. We feel really proud of it. But as I was pitching them, I could tell there's a little hesitation. So I just said it out loud. I said, you know, you're probably thinking, well, you had millions of dollars. So of course, you know, you're able to make this thing, and it worked. And then I said, we've made ideas at all sizes, and, you know, started to get into that. And the minute I said what they were thinking, they both laughed, and it just disarmed them, you know, and it was a way for us to connect, because I was no longer, you know, kind of blind to their predicament. It definitely acknowledged, you know, where they were coming from. So, okay, this idea, how did we sell this thing? We present, you know, the idea, we've talked about it a little bit. It's replicating the Super Bowl stadium in Fortnite. Gamers could go, they could meet NFL players, they could win prizes. We did a lot of Twitch streams showing off the power of 5G, showing how 5G enables mobile technology, which is going to bring gaming, mobile gaming, you know, to the 21st century and make it just as good as desktop, just as good as PC. And these are all the things that Verizon wanted to talk about. But we couldn't just make, you know, ads that said that. We wanted to make an experience. So in order to do that, you know, I already touched on how we got into the audience mindset, that there weren't going to be parties this year, that people were not going to be in the stadium. So we laid out that data. And then to support the point of Fortnite, we talked about how Fortnite was changing, and they had 80 million active users, but there was a trend that we were noticing, that there were more things, and this is pre-Facebook, pre-metaverse, pre any of that stuff when it was making the news, that Travis Scott had performed a concert inside of Fortnite. So along with Marshmello, and it was attended, Travis Scott's concert was attended by 28 million people. So we felt like this was a real opportunity to do something new. And I think one more point that I'd just love to make is, whenever you present an idea and you feel like you're onto something new, you want to get excited about that and let the client know someone else is going to do this. If we don't do this, someone else will. To put a little bit of fire underneath them, to make them feel like they're in on something that's special, and that if they take advantage of, they're going to benefit from. So that's also a good selling technique. Other ways to do it, we're about to talk about. Yep.
So what we've covered so far, I would say, is our steps 1 and 2, as you know, we're describing them. 1 is knowing you have a good idea, right? And asking yourself whether that's true and why it's a good idea strategically. But then, of course, there's the part of like a memorable presentation and explaining that idea and presenting that idea in a way that's unforgettable. And, you know, we put this slide in here just because we're big Napoleon Dynamite fans. And usually a memorable presentation does not include a dance like this, as awesome as it is, but it can mean a variety of things. And we've broken it down a bit so that we can explain it.
Yeah. So, you know, these are the things that we think about, you know, as ingredients, the right level of creative detail. So I'm sure we've all been in presentations where you're looking at a slide and there's just packed with information. You don't even know where to look. Your eye doesn't know where to go. You don't really know the point that's trying to be made. And I think having the right level of detail is really important. Making sure there's a good balance of emotion and story and evidence and data. Now, if I were to lean into one, I'd make sure you major in emotion and I would minor in evidence and data in terms of landing the point that you're trying to make. If you can hook someone emotionally and then you give them all the evidence as to why that emotion makes sense, you've got them sold. They're going to travel with you. A balance between slides and voiceover. So clearly in this presentation, we've kept our slides pretty clean. Oftentimes what Dave will do is he'll write out the presentation in the slide notes and he'll have the one point. So, you know, you haven't had your morning coffee, whatever it is, you forget what you're going to say. You can always look at that one line. If you forget everything else, if you say that line, you'll at least land the point of that slide. And I think that's a good mix, having 1 point per slide, and keeping presentations pretty brief. We'll get into a story about presentation length at the end, but I think keeping things shorter instead of longer is a good idea. And then lastly, this gets into the kind of mindset you walk into a room with. So it's a low pressure approach. You know, you don't want to force people into buying an idea. You want them to get excited about it. So you don't want to oversell, and you want to make sure they feel like they can say no. And you want to make them, if you really want to walk in with confidence, that if they say no, that's fine. Another client will buy it. And that's the best. That's sort of expert level energy you can bring in a room. And it's hard to do because obviously your career matters to you. So you don't always feel that you're often feeling a sense of pressure. But you want to make sure that you're not forcing something down their throat. You want to make sure that they feel like they've got the option to say no. It's going to make them trust you. So we'll get into a little bit of that.
Yep. Another way to think about this is the what of an idea versus the why of an idea. And we've been talking a lot about the why. And as you can tell, I think we think it's really important, which is why Aaron very deliberately designed this slide with the why as huge and the what as smaller. Because especially for a first idea presentation, of course you need to know what the idea is, and you need to tell them what that idea is. But as we've said, an idea is going to change in production, right? Like when you sell an idea, it's before you've really started making it. Maybe you've been thinking about it for a week or a couple weeks, and you've tried to work it out as much as you can, but you can't fully predict how it's going to turn out after production. So it's going to evolve no matter what. And clients don't need you to know every detail for how it's going to exist in the world in your first presentation. But they definitely do need to know why you think it's good and why you're confident it's going to work. And the reason that that is super important, why we think it's even more important, is because if you know why an idea is good, if you know like the pieces of it that are the most important for why it's going to work and be compelling out in the world, then when it does evolve over time, you know what can change and what can't change, right? You know what to maintain of the idea for it still to deliver on its potential, still deliver for the audience, deliver for the brand. So we would say, like, when you're thinking about the level of detail, definitely kind of explain, what the idea is, but we would lean more into why you think it'll work, because that you definitely need to know, even if you haven't worked out all the ways that it's going to work when you actually make it.
So yeah, and I think if you've structured your argument correctly and you really nail the why, the idea seems inevitable. It can seem like the person has to do this idea. It's the only idea they should do. And that's the best argument you could make. So it really does pay to put that stuff up front. I'm about to, along with Dave, pitch a musician about an idea that we're really excited about. It's a new way to do a music video. And I was so excited about this idea. I created the presentation and I didn't put the why at the beginning. And I haven't pitched it yet. We're about to, but I went back and put it in the front, because even if they agree with me, it's better to have it in the front just in case they don't. This is their career. They're going to spend a lot of money on it. They want to make sure they don't make any mistakes. They're going to be as protective as any other client, even though they're creative, even though they're a musician, even though it's a little bit different than a brand. So going back and putting that why in there is a step that we always do, no matter what. So next up, what about slide detail? You know, how much do you want to put on a page? Honestly, oftentimes in a first presentation, we'll just put a paragraph, a description on a slide and a key visual, and that's it. And if the idea is good, it should stand for itself. And if you've thought about it and given it the rigor that it deserves, you know, for us, and this is our approach, how is it a press headline? It should be able to be described really, really simply. Now, sometimes people will say, well, what about when clients ask to have a presentation sent to them afterward and you have a lot of VO? Well, we do two different versions of that deck. So we've got one version we present in person, and that one's really clean. It's really nice. We've got big imagery. We've got just a statement on a page. And then we do another version, because if they're going to send it to all the people who weren't in the room, we'll add in all those little details as a paragraph in smaller type on the page so that people can read. So that's important. And as an example of one of these ideas, here's one that we pitched to Oscar Mayer that was literally this. We went back and found it out of the decks. I don't know how Dave found this one, but he dug it up and took a screen grab. So this was for butcher thick cut bacon. It was a really thick cut of bacon. And as you know, Americans love their bacon. So we were looking at this brick and we decided that it looked like gold, like a brick of gold. So then the idea came up, can we turn it into currency? And the minute, you know, we had that idea, we thought, well, it'd be a lot of fun if we sent somebody across the United States to use this bacon as currency, to pay for things like gas, to pay for, you know, lodging, roof over their head, food, what have you. And then we would film it. We would put it on Twitter, on Facebook, and whatnot. And this is how it sold. Now, I will say this client was for Oscar Mayer, and they were pretty good. They were a pretty good client where they didn't need a whole lot of rationale up front because they were pretty much in agreement with us. So we were able to present it without a lot of upfront. And what's good about that is it just means that we knew our audience. Now, if we had been presenting to a different client, let's pretend it's Hanes, we would have had a whole section about why would we be doing this? Why would we be sending a guy across the United States? And, you know, we would kind of get into more of those reasons. And, you know, as you structure an idea, you want to think about emotion, you know, versus evidence. And they're kind of different, right? You know, and when you get down to human behavior, humans are emotional, right? They're not rational. So whenever you're thinking of an idea, you're often thinking of it through an emotional lens. You know, you're making something you know is going to emotionally move people. It's not really rational. But what's interesting is when you present it, you want to do the same thing, but you also want to have that layer of evidence to talk about, you know, the thing that we keep hammering home is the why. So it is important to do both. I try to use as much emotion as possible, whenever possible, whatever does that. Music, and we'll start getting into, you know, a little bit of the pitch theater in a little bit, but GIFs are good. You know, video is great. Anything you can do to just heighten an emotion is positive. You know, you don't want it to feel flat. Always better to do it in a room. You know, it's hard to do it over Zoom, but you want to make sure your energy is up if you're doing it over Zoom.
Yeah, just to add to that a bit. I think emotion matters a lot, and it's kind of similar to story, right? Like, is your idea a romance? Is it a thriller? Is it a drama? Right? Like, depending on what the idea is, you want to make sure that you're hitting that emotion in the right way when you present it, because that will shape like how the idea plays out, how you execute it, and how it's going to land with the audience, right? So we've done a lot of comedy in our careers. So we like comedies in terms of stories, but when you're thinking about the idea and the emotion, like think about what kind of story it is, because it helps shape how you sell it. And then of course, how you make it. Then this next point is find the right balance between what you put on the slide and of course, what you explain in voiceover. This slide is a funny example because the headline isn't even a complete thought. So it definitely needs the voiceover to complete. But like Aaron started to say earlier, right? Like we like to have clear takeaways on each slide, because most people who see your deck aren't going to have your VO, right? Like that's why we will do different versions, right? Like that first presentation, you're there to explain every slide, to add your voiceover. And then when it travels after that first presentation, right? So the clients need to talk to their boss about it. Their bosses need to talk to their bosses about it. They're not going to have all your VO necessarily. So you do need to think about that balance between what's on the slide and what you're saying. I always think that the best voiceover adds context and just kind of interesting anecdotes to what's on the slide. And this is pretty basic, but I think it needs to be said. You definitely do want to write your VO down and practice it beforehand. Aaron and I went through this presentation an hour and a half ago, right? Just to make sure that we had our notes written down. It was all clear in our heads. We knew what we were going to say versus what was on the slides. And I think as young creatives, we needed to learn that, and we needed to like keep it as a habit, because it is super important. Like every presentation is going to be better if you practice it first. And if you look at that deck, you look at what's on the slide, and then you're like, okay, what do I want to add to it that just sounds like a funny joke or a smart point that I'm going to make on this slide as well. So it's definitely important to prepare and do that, because it makes a huge difference.
Yep. And now this one's a big one. We see this happen a lot. We've done it ourselves. It's an easy mistake to make. And it's what it says. Don't oversell it. Don't, because I think the minute you start doing that, it shows that you're not really listening. You're not really respecting your audience, and maybe you even doubt the idea. It doesn't really show a lot of confidence. Now, with younger creatives, we see this a lot as they pitch us, as creative directors, and they'll keep selling and keep selling and keep selling. Now, what happens is you end up losing trust. So if you care about the relationship of the person that you're pitching to, don't oversell, because if they don't buy this idea, they're likely going to buy the next idea that you bring, so long as you've been building this relationship, you've been building trust. And if you oversell, you're going to ruin that. And the minute they don't trust you, it's hard to establish that again. So I can't stress enough, don't oversell. One of our, and there's ranges with this, right? And everyone's going to have their own style. There's people who like to do more of a hard sell. We've certainly done that. We kind of sometimes play good cop, bad cop, where, I'll oversell and then Dave will soften it, or, there's definitely a calibration there. I'd say on the lightest end was an old colleague of ours from Britain, where he would just talk about the idea and that was it. And he wouldn't try to sell you. He would just talk about the idea in his lovely accent and try to bring people in. And it worked often. But with clients who were more difficult and who were more scared, it didn't work at all. So there is sort of this balance there. And that's why, we've been adding strategy and data and all these things over the years, because it's been what's worked. And when we've just relied on our guts and the emotion and the excitement around an idea, it doesn't always work. So,
yeah. And just a couple other things to add here. Overselling can mean, kind of two different things. One is when you're presenting an idea, are you just talking too much about it, right? Like more than it needs. And are you kind of being too forceful about the idea, right? Like we like to think of ourselves as problem solvers. We're not, here's a solution that we feel really good about. This is why we feel good about it. You can take it or leave it, but we're not trying to force anything. So our approach is pretty low pressure. But then another example of overselling is once a client starts reacting to the idea, and sometimes they're poking holes in it, and then you kind of fight too hard against their pushback. And that's definitely what can, that I think even worse than the first example, can diminish your credibility. Because sometimes they're right. Like clients don't expect us to have all the answers. They don't expect us to like be geniuses for everything. Sometimes they bring up a point and we haven't thought about it, or it's information we never would have had because they're the clients and they just know things on the inside that we didn't know. And if they're bringing up a point and it kills the idea or it hurts the idea, sometimes all you can do is just acknowledge it because it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, good point. You're right. We didn't think about that. And that's okay, because even if that idea dies, you still have their trust. Yeah. So yeah. So next point we want to make is add as much presentation theater as you can, and be ready for things that, that will go wrong. So first thing about presentation theater is, if you haven't heard this term, it's one that we use, in America a bunch in advertising. And it's just kind of like ways to make your presentation more memorable, more unforgettable. So aside from like what's in the slides, aside from your VO, is there anything extra you can do so that your presentation is totally unforgettable, right? And that could be like GIFs, it can be music, it can be short videos. Those are, super basic examples. But one good example of like really good pitch theater or presentation theater that we heard about was a creative director at an agency that we really love was pitching a household cleaner brand. And that household cleaner brand, the core of their brand is that they didn't have any non-toxic ingredients in anything that they make. Everything was super natural, right? So whether it's like, cleaning spray or soap or detergent, everything in there was like completely natural, nothing toxic at all. And so in this presentation, this creative director, to prove how much he believed in that brand, he took a drink of this soap to show that. And that was like kind of crazy pitch theater, right? And so you don't always have to go that far, but something like that, where you're like drinking the product to show how much you believe in its core and how natural it was just a great example. So this is like, if you can add something to your presentation to make it even more memorable, it's just worth adding that kind of spice whenever you can.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, and I was typing, so I don't know if Dave covered this, but when you present, it's probably going to be the most fun meeting of the day for whoever you're presenting to. If it's a client who runs a piece of business, they've probably been in a lot of meetings about sales, about strategy, about, marketing figures and past performance and all kinds of stuff. And here you are coming into the Zoom or the room, and you've got some fun, creative work to present to them. That is going to automatically put you ahead of the other meetings that they've been involved in. So take advantage of that, make it fun. I've, for clients, sung songs whenever there was a song in a script, probably 6 times, 7 times in my career. And I'm a terrible singer. I can't sing at all. And it works because they can tell that I'm awful. And it's funny. It's funny to watch someone so invested in an idea really give it the theater it deserves, really act it out for them. Whenever you can do that, it's always better than just reading it coldly or dryly. I remember I've danced for some clients. There was a dancing, bit in a script, and I did that with music. The more of that stuff you can do, the better. It's always fun. And honestly, if you're not a good actor, and if you're not a good singer and you're not a good dancer and all that, it actually makes it funnier. Sometimes that can be a really good thing. Now, if it's different and it's not comedy and it's a serious tone, bring your emotion down and really try to invest in that script and kind of paint that picture for them. So I think there are no rules. It's whatever you think will make an interesting piece of, you could think of it as almost entertainment. So be creative. I'll often try to think of at least a couple jokes to give clients just in the beginning, just to lighten the mood a little bit. Those are always good things.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm actually going to add a rule, which is for scripts. And this is a question that someone sent in advance, just about how to present scripts, because it's something that we do all the time. Most creatives in advertising present scripts really regularly. And we do think that you definitely should act them out. Don't just read a script cold, monotone. It makes a huge difference. And even if that script is amazingly written and it's beautiful and it's the best script that anyone has ever written, if you present it without emotion and without acting it out, it's not going to land, and you're not going to communicate how it feels for when it's actually going to be shot on set. So one thing that I definitely want to stress is, when you're presenting a script, it doesn't matter whether you're a good actor or not, but you do need to try to bring that emotion, because it makes a huge difference.
Yep. And I think you can read them. I'm seeing a question in the chat. Don't worry about reading them. Reading them is fine. That's great. I think just try to, act it out as you read it. Sometimes Dave and I have taken different parts. Dave will play one part, I'll play another part. That's always fun because there's an interplay between the two. Or, Dave's a woman and I'm a man, and that's always fun too. It's just, I think, try to make it fun and memorable. Now we're going to give you guys all of our secrets. And the secrets are that, disappointingly, there are no secrets. So, I think a lot of this is not rocket science. I think a lot of this is very, very obvious. And a lot of you might be saying, I can't believe I've been sitting here for, an hour and 15 minutes and all this sounds obvious, but I think it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget some of these just basic things that, you want to make sure that you're clear. You want to make sure that you're memorable. You want to make sure that you have data backing up your ideas. I think all those things are really important, and they are easy to forget, because when you work in an agency, when you work with team members, everybody has ideas, and everybody has ideas on how to present things. And we'll get into some stories about that in a little bit. And a presentation can become really confused. It can become really muddled. It can have too many ideas in it. It can have too many thoughts in it. So I do think just keeping things simple is really important. Okay, so now moving on, what do you do when a disaster happens, right? Like a Zoom is frozen, or, one of your team members doesn't show up, or, the client that you're supposed to present to is a no-show. This stuff happens, and it happens more often than not. And I think your ability just to roll with it is the best thing you can do. I remember I showed up to a presentation, and I was supposed to present this DVD that was supposed to present a video. And that was the whole point of the presentation, was to show the video. And I showed up and I put the DVD, and tells you how long ago it was. I think it was over 10 years ago, into the DVD player. And I hit play, and it's the incorrect format. We never checked it. So the DVD doesn't work. And I'm there and the clients are there. And I thought, well, we've got the next, half an hour. Why don't we just talk? And I told them about the video. I acted it out, as silly as that was. And then we ended up having a really interesting conversation about what goes into, what went into the video and the strategy behind it. And it turned into an awesome meeting. We ended up sending them the DVD. We've been in other presentations where someone passed out before the presentation. So they literally, weren't able to make it. And what happens then is you can tell the client, that one of your teammates wasn't able to show up and you're presenting their slides, and that's okay. One of the points is we're all human. Things happen. Don't sweat it too much. Just roll with it. I think this is a pretty obvious one, but don't make this mistake. Don't ever say, I'm not good at public speaking, or, or start kind of second guessing yourself in front of people. I think it's important just to, it's okay to be self-deprecating. I'll make jokes when I'm singing, but I think, just be as confident as you can be.
Yep.
And then we'll get on to some tips, and then I think we can answer some questions.
Yep. Tech checks. This is, again, one of the reasons why we've been using a bunch of GIFs in this presentation, but since the pandemic Zoom era, we don't usually do video. Just because if it is a really nice video, it's like a rip that we've created or whatever it is. And we spent maybe a week editing it. And then it shows up on Zoom and it slows down and looks like shit. Like that's just something that we've learned and keep in mind now, is to avoid video on Zoom because usually it lags. Other tech checks, Aaron, like what else do we remember?
I think, obviously just double checking things. Oftentimes people forget cords or chargers or just, things like that. Just make sure you have everything, backups of backups. I think in today's age, it's not as necessary. I think, if your Zoom is acting glitchy, you can turn off your video and just use audio. That's totally fine. Just always, just roll with it and find a workaround. Last little bit before we get to some questions, is what to wear. And Dave's going to cover this one. I remember asking when I was a young creative, what do I do? A suit? Like, what do you want me to wear to this thing? So Dave's going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can sound like a joke, right? Like you want to look cool when you're presenting and trying to sell an idea, but we do mean it seriously, right? And we mean it on a fashion level, right? I mean, I personally think one of my favorite things about advertising is being able to express myself and my personality through my fashion choices. And that's what's fun about advertising, is that it's not formal. But I think this is really a slide about trust, and about people trusting you. The clients want to feel like you're culturally tapped in, like you have style, and that can be your fashion. It can be your Zoom background. It can be just how you carry yourself generally. So even if it's not really a fashion decision, you definitely do want to be aware of like how you're carrying yourself and how you come across to the clients, because whether we like it or not, they are going to judge you on that stuff. They're going to be critiquing whether you look cool. They're going to be critiquing whether you are confident. And, the point about confidence, it doesn't mean that something can't go wrong. But when something goes wrong, there's confidence in just acknowledging that it went wrong. It's like, well, this thing got totally fucked, but we're going to play it by ear now and figure it out. And they don't expect anyone to be perfect, but definitely how you carry yourself matters in terms of selling an idea, and they need to trust you. And that's why we made that point about how you push back, and whether, there is such a thing as pushing back too much, because then they just start thinking that you're argumentative or combative and don't feel like you're listening to them. So this is just, make sure you kind of are aware of how you're presenting yourself. Yep.
And I think just one note is, often creative people are the kind of representatives of communities they're trying to reach. You're often probably more of a gamer than your client might be, or you're more into music than your client might be. So the fact that you kind of look the part is a good thing. So, Tomas, I can see, you want to wear an Adidas suit. That's great. I mean, I think if that's your personal brand, I think it's awesome. And I think that actually helps presentations. So it's a bummer, you know, that your employer doesn't allow that. I think that's a mistake. I think creative people are unique, and yeah, you should be able to kind of wear what you want. We're now just gonna, you know, get to some questions. If you guys have questions, put them in the chat. We received some from Skavat before we arrived, so we've got a couple of those bolded. We're gonna kind of rifle through those, but I think if you guys have more, definitely hit us with them. You know, whatever we didn't cover, whatever questions you guys have. Dave, do you want to take the first?
Yeah, let me actually hit some of them that are in the chat just real quick. So one was, how do we feel about like just pausing a presentation to press play on a video? I think, you know, people do that all the time, to be honest. Like that's kind of normal to do. Sometimes that feels a little weird though, because you're you know, doing a dynamic presentation. Hopefully the clients are asking questions, you know, in return. It feels a bit like a conversation. And then you push pause, or you pause to push play on a video, and we're all just watching. And sometimes that can feel a little weird. So this isn't like a great answer to that question, because if you've created a rip video, sometimes you do need to create a rip video to give the client a sense of the emotion for what a piece of video will be when you actually make it, right? So in the selling stage, you'll make kind of like a fake version. And so that's necessary. You want to do that, but sometimes it's also a little cringy, right, in the middle of a presentation. So it kind of depends. What other, we can go back to other questions that people asked.
Yeah, you know, there's people, you know, having clients kind of force you to do certain things. That happens. You know, clients say, I'm paying you, I want it done this way. I think the best way out of that, if you truly think what they're telling you is preposterous and doesn't work, is to show them, is to do what they've said and to create the version that they've asked for, and then to create an alternative and to show them that alternative and to say, you know, we also explored this and we think this is, you know, probably the better way to do it. I think that goes a long way, because it says, I'm listening to you, I understand you, and I actually think this other solution solves the problem that we're talking about much, much better. So what to do, I think Dave kind of covered this, when your listener stops you with an argument and it makes your idea completely irrelevant. We've had that happen, for sure. We've had that happen often. Sometimes a client has said to us, why are we advertising this product? We shouldn't be advertising this product. I would then take the next 20 minutes or half an hour to build trust with that person, because you're not going to sell them that idea. And the way that you can build trust with them is by listening and by engaging with them and repeating back things that they're saying to you, and actively listening, I think, is the best approach there.
Yeah, that kind of situation is an epic fail. That's not even your fault. If you just got the wrong brief, if the agency gave you the wrong brief, then you get to a presentation, they're like, this isn't right at all. There's really nothing you can do about that but acknowledge it. Usually that doesn't happen, obviously. Usually it's more like, well, this doesn't make sense for us for the following reasons, or what about this? And sometimes that's like a huge hole in your idea. But like Aaron said, if it's real, right? If we're trusted partners and even though we're making creative decisions, we're making creative decisions based on logic and based on strategy and based on evidence. So if that's the case and someone presents evidence that completely kills an idea that we're presenting, you can't ignore that. You can't like try to lie your way through it. The only thing you can do is acknowledge that it's real, and then we'll come back with a different idea, or here's another idea that we just went through that doesn't have that issue. You know, truth is truth. I think, and problems are problems, and they can only be solved in certain ways. Sometimes you can't solve a problem in a certain way, and they bring that up, and you have to roll with it. Just is what it is.
Yep. So I'm seeing a question in the chat that says, do you have any cases where you felt the reaction, so you kind of know it's not landing, and you tried to create a new idea in the presentation? Or do you always ask for more time and prepare new ideas more carefully? Now, I think the answer to that is yes, take the time before you pitch something live, because you might regret it. You might pitch something that you don't want to make later. It might make sense in the moment, but it might not be the thing that is the best idea. I will say, if I notice something come up early in the presentation, I will change the way that I present it. So if I notice that someone is more into the numbers than they are, the creative, I'll start talking numbers. I'll start hammering numbers. And you want to figure out who's the decision maker. And I think this gets into sorry, there's another question from Toma about doing pre-research on who the client is personality-wise. Now, this is where having a really good account executive helps. So if you have a great account executive, it's their job to let you know what makes them tick. Now, if you don't have that, and we've certainly been in situations where we don't have that information, you're going to want to figure it out pretty quickly. And sometimes you can do that in casual conversations. So one way to see if they're a student of creativity, if they like marketing, if they like creative ideas, is to just talk about creative ideas. Just say, did you see the new Nike thing, that they did with Colin Kaepernick, and see their response. If they're like, oh my God, it was amazing. It was so cool. I really admire that, blah, 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 blah. That's great. You know that they are a student of marketing, and you're able to pitch them creative ideas that they can get excited about. You'll learn pretty quickly if someone is not like that. They might not even care. I remember asking a client, tell me about your favorite campaigns, and they couldn't even answer. So they didn't even have any campaigns ever done any time in the history of advertising that they even liked. So it was like, well, if you're not really someone who's into creative ideas, so I'm going to have to pitch to you in a very different way. I'm going to have to pitch to you about numbers, and I'm going to have to pitch to you about success and why this is going to work and why this is going to sell a product. So I think casual conversation is a good way to do it. And figuring out just conversations that you can start to kind of get a sense of where they're coming from. Now, ideally, you need to know, what is it that they're afraid of? What is it they're scared of? For a lot of people, it's failure. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to lose my job. I want to make sure that I make the right decision. That drives a lot of decision making. So you want to remove as much fear as you can. And that's why data really does help. Setting up, dissuading those fears.
Yep. I can answer. We've got a question from Dima and then a question from Kiro that I can answer real quick. So question from Dima is about standing up and pacing versus sitting down. And, I don't have a strong answer to this because both of them work. The one thing I will say is it depends how formal you want your presentation to be. So often, if it's a pitch, right, and it's not just an idea presentation, but it's like a full pitch for a piece of business for a new client that's going to hire your agency, for hopefully years. A lot of people do those as formal presentations, and the teammates kind of like stand up at the front of the room, and it feels really serious. Usually when we're pitching ideas, and I think this applies to, to new business pitches as well, we're sitting down because we want it to feel casual. We don't want it to feel like it's a super serious formal thing that's scary or whatever. It's just a conversation, and we're not trying to push anything too hard. We believe in our ideas. We believe that they're good solutions, and we're just presenting them. And we're presenting their merits, and we don't want to add any kind of pressure to that conversation. So it's better to be casual. Yep. And then Kiro, you had a question about, do you take an advance payment for developing an idea? And do you just sell ideas on demand? Especially for us as a new agency, we definitely get paid for concepting. So when we're doing budgets, we phase out the different the different pieces of the project, right? So if it's 2 or 3 weeks to come up with an idea, we definitely get paid for that time. And then the production part of the idea of actually making it is a separate part of it that we also get paid for. Sometimes we add another layer where first is we'll present a few ideas as options, and that's maybe a couple weeks. And then once we have that presentation, it's narrowing down the idea that we're all going to make. The client, picks their favorite. And then it could be another 2 weeks of just thinking through that specific idea for all the details that we can think of, all the ways that we're going to play out, what the launch plan is going to be, all that stuff. And then once we have all those answers, that's when we actually hire a production company and we, production, whether it's an illustrator or whatever it is to like actually make it, that's a third phase and we get paid for that too.
Yep. And I'm seeing a question from Misha about preparing a presentation where it's your third day and you're wondering if you have enough credibility. Now, you have credibility as a creative person or as an not a person who is skilled at what you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been hired. However, they know more about the organization, the brand than you do. And I think it's important to say, hey, these are things that have worked and they've worked for other clients or they've worked because of X, Y, and Z reason. And you've got a really solid rationale. What you're not trying to pretend is that you know more about the brand than they do. You know more about the organization than they do. And we'll often say in a pitch, a fresh pitch, meeting new people, hey, we've taken some educated guesses. You gave us some information and we've used our intelligence to make some guesses about your product. Obviously, when we actually work together, we're going to work with you. We're going to collaborate. We're going to, figure this out together. People love to hear that. Instead of us kind of coming in the room and pretending we're experts. No one likes that because it just says that you're not someone that can listen. You're not someone that can be a good partner. So I think, don't worry about it. You have the reasons that you're presenting the things that you're presenting. And I think so long as you acknowledge that really they are the experts of the brand, that's a good thing. And then they're going to help you build your idea.
Question about, should we answer this question about PDA and why we started it?
Sure.
Well, first of all, Aaron and I have been lucky to have a lot of independence in our careers, right? So we had a bunch of years at 360i, we had a bunch of years at Ogilvy, and we had several years at RGA. And in each of those situations, we came in as creatives, and then through selling work, we were able to kind of move up into group creative directors where we were managing creatives under us. So usually we had a lot of freedom and independence for the kinds of ideas that we pitched and how we kind of managed clients. And then we spent a bunch of years as freelancers. So we've kind of always known that we like being our own bosses. And so it wasn't such a crazy idea to start our own thing is one thing. And then what I said at the beginning of the presentation, in terms of our philosophy on advertising, that was never something that we thought about one day and just made up. It's just something that through presenting ideas that felt right to us and making ideas that felt right to us, we started to realize that we have an approach that is pretty unique. And that approach is not just communicating one way in terms of advertising on behalf of a brand. Usually what we make is a kind of activation where people come to that activation. We're making something that people have to love, or else they're not going to share it. They're not going to like it. They're not going to interact with it. They're not going to play with it. So that's kind of become our philosophy for PDA. That's why we named it PDA, Public Display of Affection. That's why we've got hearts all over our presentation and all over our branding, because we truly believe that what people want out of brands now is for them to prove their values, right? You can just say something and people will either believe you or not. But if you're a brand and you're proving your values and you're proving that what you say, you're proving what you say through some kind of action. And if that action is something that people love, like you're intersecting something that your audience really loves in what you're doing, then we know you're going to make an impact and people are going to love you. So that's basically that's the philosophy of our agency.
Yeah. So I'm seeing there's a couple questions I think are kind of tied together. So one of them is a really good one. How do you take a conservative client and lead them to a fresh idea? We face this often. So our hope is that PDA is not attracting those clients because of our branding and the work that we've done, but it could happen in the future. In the past, we've had a lot of clients like this, and there's a couple ways you can do it. One is have your strategist, or if it's you as the creative or the account person, whoever has the relationship with the client, continue to send them new, interesting marketing that's happening and explaining why it works. Just to start getting their brain in motion of your competitors are doing this, other brands, even outside of your category, are doing this, and it's working. I think the main thing conservative clients want to know is, will it work? And that's why we're so data heavy, so much about, this piece of data proves that this idea will work, and we want to show numbers. So I think as much of that prep as you can do, and also identifying what is the problem they're trying to solve? What are they trying to, say to their consumers? Do they want to sell more product? I mean, every brand has a desire. They want something, they want to be perceived in a certain way. So I think trying to get to that, and I'm not going to lie to you, it's not easy. It's incredibly, incredibly hard. But if you stick to it, you build those relationships, and don't have expectations that it's going to happen overnight. It takes time. I mean, sometimes it can take a year for a client to really start to trust you, and you can really start selling them those interesting ideas. I think a lot of the ideas that Dave and I have sold that are our favorites were sold in year 2 or 3 or 4 after knowing them and after they trusted us. And then the reason why I wanted to pair it with another question is, do you proactively pitch ideas? The answer is yes, 100%. We'll often think of an idea and go pitch them. They didn't even ask for it. Now, the best way to do that is think of the brief, think of the right assignment for yourself. So it's got to be the right product. It's got to be the right timing, and try to get that intel. But proactively pitching ideas, 100%. Wake up and smell the bacon, that dongle, that was proactive. That was Dave and I, along with the team, developing, it was about a 20-page presentation, proactively took it to our client, and he was over the moon. He was so happy because it was work we had done that we believed in and we felt like was going to really benefit his business.
Yeah. And I like I said in the chat, like, because that was a physical thing that is hard to imagine, or even if you can imagine it, most advertising isn't a manufactured device. Like we had to find a company in Japan to like make that thing, right? And we designed it, we worked on the prototype, all that stuff. So especially for an idea like that, we made a physical thing in-house at the agency, and it was fun for our kind of tech developers and all that stuff. It was really helpful for us to have actually made it before we took it to the clients to prove to them that it could actually be made and could actually work.
Yeah. For an alcohol brand here in the States, we were presenting an idea that you could hold your phone up and it would scan the label on the bottle. It wasn't a QR code. It was just the actual label. And we made it. And it was the QR code, if you want to call it that, was invisible. So it was there and your phone could pick it up. And we had a message inside the bottle. So it was a video message, and we just made it. We had our tech team make it. We did it at Ogilvy. Ogilvy wasn't considered very digital, but we just prototyped it, and then we gave it away as a gift. And we said, okay, you each get a bottle with a message in it. And they were able to scan it and look at it later. And that was super fun. It was a really good technique.
Yeah. Just going back to this question for 1 minute. Usually when you're presenting proactive ideas, it's with a client that you already have a relationship with. And we get this question a lot from like production companies or just other friends that we have that aren't really in advertising or don't have clients. And I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but if you don't have a brand as a day-to-day client, it is really hard to just come as a stranger who they don't know at all and just pitch an idea, because they usually have a strategy that they're working with for that year or for a few years. There's a lot of like foundational back-end stuff that agencies and their, and the brand clients know. So if you have a client that is your client, they definitely are welcome to new ideas, because you know their brand, you know their strategy, you know what they're working on, and they're never going to say like, oh, whoa, you've got an idea that we didn't give you a brief on. We definitely don't want to hear it. Like, they'll never say that. But if you're someone that's on the outside and have no relationship to them, it is actually really hard to pitch ideas to clients that way.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. One question I want to ask, or one question I want to answer from before, and maybe this is our last one, was where is the point of no return when your concept or idea is asked to be changed or corrected? How do you not allow it to be changed beyond recognition and to defend your boundaries? And this is something that ties back to our whole presentation, which is there is no time when you're making an idea for a client that they're not going to ask you to change it, and they're not going to have notes. And sometimes they want you to change the script a day before you're shooting, and you can try to defend your stuff as much as you want. But in the end, they're the ones paying for everything, and they're the boss, and you can't always win those battles. So I think the general answer to this question is you always have to be flexible about changes, because you're never going to win all of those battles. But this is why you need to know the why of the idea and why you love it and what pieces of it have to not change. And this is where you have ammo to talk to a client about that, because certain aspects of it have to stay good and have to stay true to the idea for the idea to work. And other aspects of it can change, right? A lot of aspects of an idea can change as long as you're maintaining the core pieces that are necessary for it to work with the audience out in the market.
Yeah, and I think really understanding the nature of their question and what's driving it. I think to really get to the why, the change. What are they trying to solve for? Obviously, they want to make a change and they want to solve for some problem. So you might have a solution that doesn't ruin the idea. So I think getting to the bottom of where it's coming from can be helpful. You definitely don't want to be defensive. You definitely don't want to pretend or appear that you're not listening. I think it's really important that people feel heard and they feel respected. So make sure you do that. And I think if you can meet them on that level, you might be able to change what they're suggesting, because they're not the creative. They might be ruining the idea and they don't even realize it. In their mind, they're fixing it. In their mind, they're making it better, but oftentimes it's not. So, what else do we have in the chat? The costs of proactive ideas. Yeah, Dave is kind of answering. I mean, how do you deal with the costs? Those are costs that you have to eat. That's your own time. They haven't paid for it. There's no agreement that they owe you anything for it. So you're taking a risk, but the process of developing it, maybe you sell it to somebody else. I mean, there's a lot of ideas that are very famous in advertising that one client didn't buy them and then another one did. There's I don't want to name them, but there's certain ideas that were out there for a while. They were pitched to 6 to 7 different clients, and finally someone bought it, and then they were made and they were awarded. And so there's no shame in that. There's no shame in developing. You can kind of think of an idea as intellectual property. Someone asked before getting on here, how do you protect an idea? And the answer is you can't. You have to make it. You have to make the idea. You can't. Ideas are nothing. I could tell you guys an idea now, and everybody could take it and go make it. And I wouldn't be able to sue you or anything. There's no legal recourse here in the States around ideas. So make sure you keep them safe. Don't tell a lot of people until you are far enough along where you feel like you've got a good jump on it and you're ready to go into market. So don't share your ideas, unless you trust that person.
Tommy has a good tip. Thanks for joining, dude. Yeah, it definitely make sure your desktop is clean and you're not presenting too much to anyone that you don't want to see it. So, okay, that might be it, guys. This was awesome. Thank you for having us. Thanks for listening. We hope it was valuable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much. Bummer we can't see your faces, but really appreciate the chat. Really nice meeting you even under these awkward circumstances. And big thanks to Scott and Anya, who's on now, putting this together. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. Later. Bye. Much love. Many thanks. Okay, I guess that's it. Later, Anya. Thank you.